In the village of Obiuma, where the red earth cracked like old pottery during the dry season and softened like sorrow during the rains, there lived a young farmer named Ikenna. His life was not made of riches, but of routine, sunrise, soil, sweat, and prayer. His palms were hardened from the hoe, his dreams simple but sturdy, food on the table, laughter in the compound, and someone to share it with. Then came Amarachi. She was different. Raised by her trader mother, Amarachi had once stayed in Enugu for a school holiday. The city left a mark on her, not on her body, but in her mind. She had seen paved roads, concrete homes, and women who wore heels instead of slippers. But Enugu was not her home, and when she returned to Obioma, her laughter still rang like bells at a village wedding. That was the girl Ikenna fell for. Their love began under a mango tree. He offered her roasted corn and words thick with promise. She offered him smiles that tasted like hope. Everyone in Obioma watched them and whispered, "These two will last. They speak kindly. They walk humbly. They believe in tomorrow." And so they married, not with gold or feast, but with borrowed plates and full hearts. Ikenna built his house from sun-dried bricks, laid each one by hand, saying, "One day it will be enough." Amarachi fetched water, cooked over firewood, and helped him sell small harvests at the market. They had dreams, real ones, a bigger farm, a better roof, children who would speak English and wear shoes to school. They planted those dreams with every seed of yam, every drop of sweat on the land. But the land, like life, gives only what it wants. Some seasons, the rains came too late. The cassava withered. The goats gave no milk. Ikenna worked harder. He stayed longer on the farm. His skin burned, his back ached. But he believed. He believed that love, when sown deeply, would bear fruit even in drought. Amarachi tried to believe too. At night, under their patched zinc roof, she would stare at the ceiling and whisper, "Maybe next year." But the years were unkind. The money remained small. The laughter grew thin. Still, they held each other, through hunger, through silence, through days when there was only gari and rainwater to drink. And in the village people said, "They are strong, they love well, they will survive." But love, like a seed, must be watered, not just with effort, but with hope. And hope was drying up. What Amarachi didn't say, but often felt, was that love was not enough to silence envy. Envy of those who left the village and came back during Christmas in cars with tinted windows, with new wigs and perfumes that smelled like freedom. One night, as Ikenna counted his last coins, planning how to stretch them for market day, Amarachi sat quiet by the fire. Her eyes were far away, already halfway down the dusty road to the city. In Obioma, the elders say, "A woman who dreams only of golden doors will not stay in a house made of clay." And though the house still stood, something had already begun to crack, not in the walls, but in the bond between those who built it. The story of Ikenna and Amarachi had not yet turned bitter, but the taste of sweetness was fading fast.
The twins came in the third year of hardship. It was a rainy morning, thunder low in the sky, when Amarachi screamed from the back of their small mud house. The midwife came running, barefoot in the wet red clay, with towels tied under her arms. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering prayers, clutching charms, and waiting. And then, two cries, two girls, two miracles. Ikenna fell to his knees, rain soaking his back, palms lifted to heaven. "Chimo, thank you," he wept. "You have remembered me." They named the girls Ifunanya and Kosisochoku, love and God's will. And for a while, the house that once echoed with sighs now sang with laughter and lullabies. Amarachi glowed again. She carried her daughters with pride, their matching wrappers bright against her chest. But joy has a twin too, and its name is responsibility. 2 babies meant double the diapers, double the hunger, double the cost. Ikena's farm could barely feed 1 mouth, let alone 4. He worked longer hours, coming home after dark with cracked heels and empty pockets. Amarachi began to change. She stopped singing as she pounded yam. She stopped smiling when Ikena returned from the farm with only 3 tubers. The twins cried more, and she began to flinch at their sounds. Her shoulders sagged under the weight of motherhood and unmet expectations. One day, while hanging laundry, Amarachi watched a sleek car roll past the village road. Its windows tinted, music soft, the woman inside dressed like a magazine page. A cousin visiting from Lagos. She waved and the woman barely nodded. That night, Amarachi sat outside long after the firewood burned out. Her face was unreadable. Not angry, not sad, just empty. She turned to Ikena, who was rocking Kosishochuku on his lap, sweat still drying on his brow. "Ikena," she said quietly, "is this the life we prayed for?" He looked up slowly, unsure what she meant. But in Obioma, the elders say, "The eyes that begin to wander rarely stay shut at night." Amarachi no longer dreamed of a better life with Ikena. She simply dreamed of a better life. And once that kind of hunger enters the soul, it does not eat quietly.
It happened just before dawn. The air was thick and silent, the kind of silence that always comes before something sacred or something broken. The twins were still asleep, their small breaths soft as feathers in the still room. A rooster crowed faintly in the distance, but even that sound seemed unsure. Ikena stepped outside with his hoe slung over one shoulder. He stopped short. There she was, Amarachi, standing at the edge of the compound, a heavy bag in one hand, her eyes fixed on the road that curled toward Enugu like a question. "Where are you going?" he asked, though he already knew. She didn't turn. He stepped closer, twin daughters stirring in the background, one beginning to fuss, the other stretching her arms in the cloth cradle. "Amarachi," he whispered, his voice raw, "please, our children, your daughters, they are only 7 months old. They still search for your breast when they cry." She looked at him then, really looked, and there was no anger in her eyes, only fatigue, disappointment, a quiet storm that had gathered slowly over the years. "I'm tired, Ikena, tired of waiting for a life that never comes." "But we have life," he said, gesturing toward the house, the twins, the field. "It's hard, but it's ours." She shook her head. "What kind of life is it when you cannot dream past survival? You told me we would build more. We haven't even patched the roof." Ikena fell to his knees in the dust. "Let me try again. Let me—" But she was already turning. He reached for her wrapper, but she pulled away, walking down the narrow road, the one that swirled with dust in dry season and dreams in her mind. She didn't look back, not once. In Obioma, the elders say, "The person who walks away without looking back has already left long before their feet moved." And that morning, as the sun rose behind her retreating figure, Ikena realized that the ache of betrayal is not the loud departure, but the quiet in its place.
After Amarachi left, time did not stop, but something inside Ikena did. For days he moved like a ghost in his own home, carrying Ifunanya Kosisochuku with hands that trembled not from weakness, but from the weight of sudden solitude. No woman to boil water, no voice to hum lullabies, just two tiny girls and a father with nothing but calluses and will. He could have given them away, some whispered he should. A widowed aunt in Suka offered to take one child, maybe both. But Ikenna refused. "They are my blood," he said. "I will not divide what God gave me whole." And so he became something else, more than husband, more than father. He became the whole house, the cook, the caregiver, the dreamer, and the doer. Each morning, he strapped one baby to his back and tied the other to his chest with old wrappers that still smelled faintly of Amarachi soap. He worked the fields with sweat dripping into the soil, his daughters breathing against his body, their soft whimpers swallowed by wind. When there was no food, he crushed old cassava peels into porridge. When their shoes wore thin, he patched the soles with palm fronds. When they fell sick, he carried them barefoot to the next village for herbs. And when the twins cried for their mother in the dead of night, Ikenna held them close and told them stories, not fairy tales, but truth, softened into song. "Once there was a man who grew 2 stars in the middle of a storm," he would whisper, "and he promised them that no wind would ever carry them away." In time, the girls grew. Ifunanya had her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness. Kozisochuku sang before she could speak. They danced around their father as he weeded the garden, clapping and laughing like sunshine in motion. One day, Ifunanya hugged Ikenna's leg and said, "Papa, don't be sad. When we grow big, we will buy you a big house with a big door." Ikenna laughed, real, full, loud, a laugh that startled the birds and softened the hearts of watching neighbors. In Obioma, the elders say, "A man who refuses to bend in the storm does not break. He becomes shelter." And that is what Ikenna became, not just a father, but a refuge, built from wounds and watered by love.
It was the dry season again. 5 years since Amarachi walked away. The road to Obioma crackled under the weight of returning footsteps. The wind was restless that day, blowing fine red dust across the village square, as if whispering that something forgotten was coming home. Ikenna sat outside, mending a broken hoe while the twins played nearby, chasing each other around the guava tree. They were 7 now, taller, louder, brighter. The ache had not disappeared, but it had transformed into rhythm. Their laughter was his healing. Then came the sound of a motorcycle, grinding up the village path like a memory being dragged back to life. 3 people got off. At first, no one recognized her. The woman who once left in polished sandals now stood barefoot, her wrapper frayed, her face sunken like a deflated drum. She was thin, city thin, not fashion, but famine. Behind her stood 2 men in stiff suits, each carrying leather folders swollen with paper. Ikenna's heart stuttered. He stood slowly. The girls peeked from behind the doorway. Ifunanya squinted. "Papa, is that Mama?" The air shifted. Amarachi said, voice shaking, "Please, I need your help." He said nothing. One of the men stepped forward. "Barrister Nkem," he introduced himself. "Your wife is involved in a pending legal matter in Lagos. A man she trusted defrauded her. Now she's being held responsible for the debts. Under customary law, as her husband, you may be affected." Ikenna blinked. Wife? Customary law? He looked at Amarachi. She couldn't meet his eyes. "We're here to ask if you will formally acknowledge the marriage or sever it." Villagers had begun to gather, murmuring from behind trees and fences. Some shook their heads, others gossiped loudly. "Is it not Ikenna's wife, the one who disappeared like morning mist?" Ikenna's voice was firm, though his fingers trembled. "What do you want from me, Amarachi?" She dropped to her knees in the dust, the same dust she once stepped over so easily. "If you don't help me, they'll take me to prison," she whispered. "Please, I have nowhere else." In Obioma, the elders say,
The road you abandon may one day become the only path back. And now that path had brought her full circle, back to the man she left, and the daughters who had already learned how to live without her.
That night, the village air was thick, not with rain, but with tension, the kind that made goats restless and lamps flicker for no reason. Ikenna sat outside, under the mango tree, staring at the legal papers Barrister Nkem had left on the wooden stool. His daughters had long since gone to bed, curled together like twin blossoms in the corner of the room. But sleep would not visit Ikenna, not tonight. What kind of justice was this, that a woman could abandon her family, chase a dream into disaster, then return expecting rescue? He had made a vow never to hate her, but forgiveness, he now understood, is not always a door you can keep open forever. As he sat, the dry wind shifted. Something moved near the yam barn. At first, he thought it was a goat, but then he saw the shape crouching low, sneaking with careful steps. A person. He stood silently, grabbing the rusty cutlass by the wall, not to attack, but to protect. "Who goes there?" he called out, his voice cutting the night. The figure froze, then turned slowly under the faint moonlight. It was Amarachi. She looked wild, hair uncombed, eyes red, hands clutching a small sack like a lifeline. Her wrapper barely clung to her thin body, knees shaking as she fell into the dust. "I'm sorry. I was hungry. I wasn't going to steal much, just a few yams. I haven't eaten all day." Ikenna stood there, speechless, the woman before him almost unrecognizable, not just in appearance, but in spirit. This was not the Amarachi who danced on their wedding night. This was a stranger, hollowed out by choices, humbled by hunger. Villagers began to appear, drawn by the commotion, eyes peeking from windows, murmurs swelling like fire around dry grass. "This is a shame," someone whispered. "She brought this on herself," said another. Greed has no home when trouble returns. Ikenna raised a hand to silence them. "This is my house, my matter. Go home." They obeyed. The dust settled. The silence returned. He helped Amarachi up. She could barely walk. Her bones pressed through her skin like old memories trying to escape. Inside, he placed a bowl of leftover gari and cold agusi soup before her. She ate like someone starving, not just for food, but for dignity. The twins watched from the doorway, silent, unsure whether to be afraid or sad. In Obioma, the elders say, "The one who trades shelter for shadow will return wet when the sky breaks." And in that moment, Ikenna understood. Amarachi had lost more than her way. She had lost herself. But his decision was yet to be made. Morning would come soon, and with it, consequences.
It was past midnight when the knock came. Not gentle, not respectful. It came like thunder, loud, impatient, final. Bam, bam, bam. The twins sat upright, frightened. Ikenna moved to the door with steady feet but a pounding heart. He opened it to find two men in uniform, dark blue shirts glinting under lantern light, belts tight with radios, cuffs, and the weight of law. "Are you Mr. Ikenna Okoye?" one asked. "Yes," he replied. "You are needed at the station, immediately." "What for?" The taller officer, a broad-shouldered man with tired eyes, unfolded a paper and held it up. "It concerns your wife, and something she may have brought with her." Behind him, Amarachi sank lower in her seat, her face going pale. The twins clung to each other, their eyes wide with unspoken fear. "What is going on?" Ikenna asked again, louder now, not out of anger, but from that sharp tension only fathers understand when danger touches their home. The officer stepped inside, scanning the room. "Where's the bag she brought?" Ikenna pointed silently. The second officer retrieved the dusty sack from the corner and poured its contents onto the mat. Old wrappers, a broken sandal, a cracked hairbrush, and then a thick, brown envelope, stuffed with money. Everyone froze. Even the wind paused. Ikena's breath caught in his throat. Amarachi let out a cry that came from somewhere deeper than shame. "I didn't know, I swear. They hid it in my things. I was cleaning for a politician. They were stuffing bags with money. I ran when I heard the police were coming. I didn't even check." "That story will be told at the station," the officer interrupted. He turned to Ikena. "You will come too. You are still legally her husband under customary law. Until we determine who knew what, you're both suspects." "No," Ikena said, stepping back. "I'm just a farmer. I know nothing of city crimes." But his voice was thin, because he knew the law didn't care about yams and innocence. It followed documents, not dignity. The twins began to cry. "Papa, don't go!" they wailed, wrapping themselves around his legs. Ikena kneeled, holding them tight. "Shh," he whispered, kissing their foreheads. "Papa will come back, I promise." In Obioma, the elders say, "A man does not choose his storms, but he chooses how he stands inside them." And so Ikena stood, torn between the past that had betrayed him and the present threatening to do the same. As they led him into the darkness, the village watched from behind windows and half-closed doors, whispering. Not one of them knew that by morning, the earth beneath Ikena's feet would shift again. This time, in a way none of them could have imagined.
The police station smelled of sweat and rust and the kind of silence that lives between accusation and truth. Ikena sat on a hard wooden bench, wrists resting on his knees, staring at the wall. Amarachi sat across from him, rocking back and forth, her hands clutching her wrapper like it could hide her from the world. "I just wanted a better life," she muttered over and over. "I just wanted more." Her words echoed like old songs, familiar, haunting, empty now. Hours passed. The lanterns buzzed. The officers whispered behind doors. Ikena said nothing. He had nothing left to explain. And then Inspector Bala returned. He was a tall man, with a face like granite and a voice like a slammed door. He dropped a single sheet of paper on the table in front of Ikena. "You have a choice," he said flatly. Ikena leaned forward. The words on the paper blurred slightly. "If you sign this confession," the inspector said, "you take responsibility. We'll charge you. Your wife walks free. Your daughters stay home." Ikena's mouth went dry. "If you don't," the inspector continued, "you both stay. And the children, well, there are homes, facilities. They'll be cared for." Cared for, a word that sounded like abandonment wearing a clean uniform. Amarachi sobbed silently, face buried in her palms. Ikena's fingers hovered over the paper. Sign it and be caged for a crime he didn't commit? Or stay silent and lose the only two beings left in his life who still called him Papa? Outside, the sun was beginning to rise. He could almost hear the twins' laughter from memory. Ifunanya singing, Kosichokwu dancing in circles. In Obioma, the elders say, "Sometimes a man must plant himself like a tree, not because it is easy, but because the storm is watching." Ikena looked up. "Give me the pen," he said quietly. Sergeant Tunde stepped forward, placing it in his hand. And then, just as Ikena's fingers gripped it, the station door burst open. A man in a black suit stormed in, flanked by two women with briefcases.
He held up a badge. "My name is Barrister Chuka Okafor, Federal High Court." He pointed at Ikenna. "This man is under my protection. Step away." Chaos. Surprise. A table shook. Amarachi gasped. Inspector Bala's face twisted. "What is the meaning of this?" Barrister Chuka slammed a thick file on the table. "Your investigation is flawed," he said sharply. "We've traced the criminal network behind the stolen funds. Amarachi was used, exploited. But Ikenna," he turned to face him, voice softening, "this man is not only innocent, he is now a beneficiary." "Beneficiary?" Ikenna blinked. Chuka nodded. "The land used to hide part of the laundered funds belonged to your late grandfather. Legally, it's yours. The government has seized the land, and they're compensating you substantially." Amarachi's mouth fell open. Ikenna's hands went cold. "How much compensation?" he asked slowly. The barrister smiled. "Enough to build a life 10 times over. Enough for your daughters to never want again." In Obioma, the elders say, "Fate may arrive late, but when it comes, it brings both justice and a reckoning." And on that morning, as the sun spilled gold across the tiled floor, Ikenna did not sign the paper. He stood not as a suspect, but as a man whom the world had finally seen.
The station was quiet now, eerily so. Amarachi sat frozen, still kneeling on the tiled floor, her eyes wide with something between hope and fear. The word beneficiary still rang in her ears like church bells. Wealth, redemption, escape. Barrister Chuka spoke again, explaining legal terms, compensation structures, how Ikenna's name was now tied to land records and treasury authorizations. But Amarachi wasn't listening. She was watching Ikenna. The man she had once walked away from in the early light, now standing in front of her like a monument carved by pain and patience. This was not the same Ikenna. This man had walked through fire and came out with something deeper than strength, clarity. She crawled closer, reaching for his hand. "Ikenna," she whispered, voice trembling. "My husband. We can start over. Please, we can be a family again. For the children, for us." The officers turned away, giving them privacy. Even Barrister Chuka said nothing, sensing the sacred tension between two people at the final bend of a broken road. Ikenna looked at her, really looked at her. He saw not just the woman before him, but the night she wasn't there, the fevers he fought alone, the hunger he turned into lullabies, the tiny feet he washed with stream water, the promises he kept without anyone watching. "You say we, Amarachi, but there was no we when the yams rotted, when the roof leaked, when your daughters cried for you." She began to sob. "I was foolish, I was afraid, but I came back." "No," he said, cutting gently. "You didn't come back for us. You came back because life swallowed you and spit you out at the same doorstep you once despised." She lowered her head. He continued, his voice steady. "Family is not just blood. It is loyalty, sacrifice, presence. I kept the house standing while you chased shadows." Then he turned to the officers. "Am I free to go?" Inspector Bala nodded, humbled now. Ikenna picked up the file Chuka had brought, tucked it under his arm, and looked at Amarachi one last time. "I don't hate you, but I no longer carry you." In Obioma, the elders say, "Forgiveness is not always a bridge. It is sometimes just a door we choose not to open again." And with that, Ikenna walked into the morning light, his back straight, his hands empty, but his spirit full. Waiting outside were Ifunanya and Kosichoku, their small faces bright with relief. "Papa!" they cried, running to him. He dropped to his knees and held them close. "My angels," he whispered, tears breaking at last. "We're going home."
The old mud house was left behind. Its cracked walls, patched roof, and silent corners became just another story the villagers would tell their children, of a man who raised his daughters with bare hands and broken tools. Ikenna moved his family to a neighboring town, into a freshly painted white bungalow. It had glass windows that let in morning light, a garden full of hibiscus and cassava, and doors that didn't creak when opened. Ifunanya and Kosichuku had their own beds now, their own bookshelves, their own uniforms pressed and hanging neatly for school. They were enrolled in one of the best private academies, where their names quickly became known for good manners, sharp minds, and fierce hearts. And Ikenna, he became more than a father. He started a farm cooperative, hiring men and women from Obioma, paying them fairly, giving them dignity, where once there had only been survival. The same hands that once dug alone now lifted others. He bought tractors, he built grain storage, he trained the youth. When asked how he did it, he would only smile and say, "I planted pain and watered it with prayer." As for Amarachi, she left the village soon after. Some say she went to Abba, others whispered she wandered from town to town, always arriving with hope, always leaving with shame. No one really knew. The twins never asked. Sometimes villagers muttered that the girl should forgive her, that a mother, no matter how broken, is still a mother. But Ifunanya once answered softly, "We forgive her, but that doesn't mean we follow her." Kosichiku added, "Our father is enough family for a lifetime." Years passed. The twins graduated university, both with degrees in medicine. They returned often to Obioa, organizing free medical outreach in dusty schoolyards, treating villagers with care and kindness. When they arrived, people whispered, "Those are Ikenna's daughters." And Ikenna, older now, would sit on his porch in the evenings, watching them laugh on the lawn, their white coats dancing in the wind like spirits of healing. He smiled often, laughed easily, slept deeply, because he had won, not with anger, not with revenge, but with roots planted in love that refused to die. In Obioma, they now say, "When the world breaks your back, bend, but do not fall. One day your scars will become the path others walk to find their way." And so ends the story of the man who was left with nothing, but gave everything, and the daughters who turned loss into light.